Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. I saw a rainbow flag hanging in the window of a house I drove past the other day, and a question came to mind. Are they really advertising who they like to have sex with? I mean, what other message are they trying to get across? I would certainly not put a big sign in my window saying that I only have sex with those of the opposite sex. Why does this need to be advertised? And I know some would say, well, Doug, they're trying to stand up for those who are marginalized. But what really bugs me, too, is when I hear the liberal talking point of, everyone but conservative white Christian males are being marginalized. Well, the dictionary definition of marginalized is individuals or groups treated as insignificant, powerless, or outside the mainstream, often pushed to the margins of society, economy, or culture. This includes social exclusion. Individuals are retaliated against. They're relegated to fringes, making them feel unimportant or treated as outsiders. This kind of reminds me of how those that didn't want to get the jab during the COVID times were treated. But I digress. Who is really, though, being marginalized? Let's think about that for a second. Who is really being marginalized? Certainly not the LGBTQP2S plus crowd. They not only have a day of visibility, they have a whole month where we're supposed to celebrate them and their pride. And that brings us to what happened on Monday. From Zach Jewell of the Daily Wire, he says the Chicago Bulls released guard Jaden Ivey on Monday after Ivey posted multiple videos on social media calling out the NBA's celebration of LGBT unrighteousness and speaking about his Christian faith. Ivey, who is averaging over 8 points per game this season, was dropped by the Bulls just a month after he arrived in Chicago due to a trade with the Detroit Pistons. In one video Ivey posted on Instagram on Monday, the guard ripped the NBA for celebrating LGBT Pride Month, saying, quote, "The world can proclaim LGBTQ, right?" That's what Ivey said. He said, they proclaim Pride Month in the NBA. They proclaim it. They show it to the world. They say, come join us for Pride Month to celebrate unrighteousness. They proclaim it. They proclaim it on the billboards. They proclaim it on the streets. Unrighteousness. In another video that Ivey recorded while on an airplane, he called out NBA star Stephen Curry and questioned Curry's Christian faith when he said he's not even surrendered and y'all believe he's a Christian. Y'all believe he's a Christian because he wrote Philippians 4:13. Y'all think he's a Christian, but he's cursing like the world. He don't know Jesus, and I pray he comes to the truth, is what Ivey said. The Bulls announced on Monday afternoon that the team was releasing Ivey due to conduct detrimental to the team. That's what they had to come up with. This Bulls head coach Billy Donovan told reporters shortly after the team's decision that he didn't want to get into details about the Ivey's social media posts. Donovan, he added that in his conversations with Ivey, the player has been focused on trying to rehab after suffering a knee injury and said the team hoped Ivey would be part of the roster for the long term after he was traded from Detroit. Quote, organizationally, there's certain standards I think we want to have as an organization and live up to those each and every day. This is what Donovan said. This is the coach. And he added, everybody comes with their own personal experiences, right? But we have to all be professional. There has to be a high level of respect for one another, and we've got to help each other and be accountable to those standards, unquote. Well, Ivey responded in another social media video after the Bulls had dropped him, saying, they said my conduct is detrimental to the team, right? Why didn't they just say we don't agree with his stance on LGBTQ? Why didn't they just say that? How is it conduct detrimental to the team? What did I do to the team? What did I do to the players? I did nothing but practice with them, play with them, pass the ball to them, be a good teammate to them. So he says, so why is it that the NBA and the Chicago Bulls say I'm detrimental to the team? How? Because I believe in the truth? Because I know Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life? Well, some Christian athletes have come in defense of Ivey after he was released by the Bulls. Patriots star running back Trayvon Henderson reposted a clip of Ivey's comments about gay pride alongside a Bible verse from Matthew 5:10, which states, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Henderson's coach, Mike Vrabel, was asked about the running back's support for Ivey and told reporters that he wants players like Henderson to express what they believe, but added that he wants to make sure that they're educated. Quote, we want to be inclusive. Everything we want to do, we want to provide an environment for people to feel comfortable, but also to share their personal beliefs. And also, we represent the team and we represent the organization, Vrabel said. New York Jets cornerback Azare Thomas also posted support for Ivey and his stance against LGBT pride celebrations by saying, the world will try to make sin look normal and righteousness look strange. Believe it or not, every single person on earth will soon have an appointment before Jesus. So if living for Christ makes us look crazy or weird, that's okay, because it isn't strange to Christ. When it's all said and done, we'll give an account to an audience of one. Romans 14:12, 2 Corinthians 5:10. That's what Thomas wrote. The Isaiah 5:20, he said, was woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness. Miami Dolphins long snapper Blake Ferguson also publicly backed Ivey after the Bulls players was released. Former New Orleans Saints tight end and outspoken Christian Benjamin Wilson said he expects the Bulls to clarify what exactly led to Ivey's release. Yeah, I don't know. But he did say conduct detrimental covers a host of actions. It's a catch-all term for everything from being late to curfew to saying the wrong thing to the media to fighting in the locker room. It allows clubs to discipline players without specifying certain actions. I expect the Bulls to clarify it if it also includes using the term unrighteousness. If so, that's an even bigger problem, Watson said. Ivey has recently become more outspoken about his Christian faith and has even opened up about his struggles with depression this season. After Ivey was kept on the bench for an entire month despite being healthy in February, the guard told reporters that because of his faith, he wasn't the same player as he used to be. He says, I'm not the J.I. I used to be. The old J.I. is dead. Ivey said, "I'm alive in Christ no matter what the basketball setting is." I really liked what Ben Shapiro had to say on the matter. He wrote an opinion piece and he said, "Here are some actions you can take in the NBA and still not get waived from your team." All right, are you ready? Wield a gun while drunk at a strip club. Knock up every woman in a 4-mile radius of every NBA stadium. Get arrested for alleged felony assault after concussing and strangling your girlfriend. What is the one thing you absolutely, positively cannot do, especially during Holy Week? Let me introduce you to NBA guard Jaden Ivey out of Purdue, where he scored 17 points and 0.9 rebounds per game as a sophomore, and then was drafted 5th overall in the 2022 draft by the Detroit Pistons. Ivey is a good player. He posted 16 points, 5 assists, and 4 rebounds per game in his rookie year. In his second season, he scored 16 points per game. He was up to almost 18 points per game before he was injured in his third season and was then traded to the Chicago Bulls. And that is where the trouble began. This week, Jaden Ivey posted a video about the NBA's Pride Month. This, of course, is the month when the NBA and pretty much all NBA teams have nights dedicated to LGBTQ plus minus divided by sign. Jaden Ivey got himself in trouble because he posted a video talking about the NBA's Pride Month on Instagram. He's a newly converted religious Christian. They proclaim Pride Month and the NBA, he stated. They proclaim it. They show it to the world. They say, "Come join us for Pride Month, to celebrate unrighteousness." They proclaim it. That seems like a fairly traditional Christian belief that you should not actually celebrate Pride in what is considered a sin by the vast majority of the religious world. The immediate response of the Chicago Bulls was to can him. They announced that they had waived him due to conduct detrimental to the team. Apparently, it was very, very bad for the team that he put out an Instagram video proclaiming the same thing that churches all over the country say all the time. It was suggested that Ivey seems to be spiraling. Ivey has reported depression in the past, and it is unclear whether he is in the midst of some sort of mental issue or not. But if you're going to cite evidence of mental issues, this is not the best evidence. For him to declare that traditional religious belief says that you shouldn't celebrate Pride in what is considered a sin is not a spiral. I know some of the things that were put out there. Chicago Bulls head coach, as we talked about, Billy Donovan, said, I think it's a situation for him where, it's on his own personal Instagram. I don't want to get into what was put out there on Instagram, but certainly for him, I hope he's okay. I've had conversations with Jaden, and he's always been about rehabbing his knee and thinking and trying to get on the court and trying to play. But I think organizationally, there's certain standards. I think we want to have an organization and live up to those each and every day. Not a strong rebuke from the coach, but nonetheless, the Bulls let him go because, of course, you cannot say anything that violates the precept of full-scale wokeness on these sorts of issues. Jaden Ivey then went to Instagram Live to defend himself, saying they said my conduct is detrimental to the team, right? He stated, why don't they just say we don't agree with his stance on LGBT? Why didn't they just say that? How is it conduct detrimental to the team? What did I do to the team? What did I do to the players? I did nothing but practice with them, play with them, pass the ball to them. Good teammates to them said, good job, good shot. I said these things to my teammates. It was never detrimental to them. So why is it that the NBA and the Chicago Bulls say that I'm detrimental to the team? Because I believe the truth, because I believe and I know Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He has a point. He says the team could have just said, we disagree with his comments. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. In the UFC, this perhaps this happens all the time. Dana White routinely says this about people that he disagrees with in the UFC, people who say things that are normally bad. He is willing. He will say, "You're allowed to say what you want to say. I disagree with it, but it's not my job to police the speech of other people." But the Bulls just waived Ivey, who also criticized Stephen Curry. He went off on Curry because Curry is frequently brought up as, by critics of traditional Christianity in the league as the example of what Christianity should look like, meaning that you cite the vestige verses from the Bible while ignoring, traditional moral practice. And Ivey said to that, that's why you got Stephen Curry, and he not even surrendered. And we read that quote. But he also said, I pray he comes to the truth, that him and his family will be saved in Jesus' name, because all that stuff is not going to matter on Judgment Day. The rings he got. And I'm wondering, he says, precisely what Ivey said here that merits him being waived. Let's be real about this. If he were saying the opposite, that Pride Night is the best, or came out as gay today, he'd be celebrated by the league. He'd be touted as one of the most important basketball players alive. The NBA has a political bent, without a doubt, and are putting at risk an entire Christian audience and traditionalist audience that looks at this and says, hold up, you get waived for saying that you don't believe that Pride Night ought to be celebrated? Not because you did anything wrong, just because you said that you don't agree with the league's stance on these issues? Back in January of 2025, Ivey said this. He said, my testimony is that, when you're away from Jesus, when you're not close to him, and when you don't have a relationship with him, Satan is there. He wants to steal, kill, and destroy. That's all he comes here to do. He doesn't want to give you peace. He wants to make your life hell. And that's what I dealt with, most of my life. When I came to know Jesus, my life, my living, I did a whole 360. I have that peace. I have that joy that I've been searching for my entire life. Let's recall that the NBA had an entire controversy engulfed it surrounding whether they should have a night honoring a strip club in Atlanta. We talked about that here on the podcast. And that required the NBA to actually step in after weeks of consternation about whether or not that should happen. But apparently, the minute you sound off and say, hey, Pride Night, it's got some connotations that are anti-Christian. The minute you say that, you're gone. That's an insane tactic from a league that wants to maximize its fan base, not minimize it. During Holy Week for Christians, that's an astonishing stance by the league. I'm hopeful that some other team will give Jaden Ivey another chance. Maybe the Portland Trailblazers. That'd be awesome, right? Because, man, the Chicago Bulls really screwed up here in a major way. But is not just Christians that the Rainbow Mafia has gone after. In fact, Megan Brock of the Daily Wire wrote this. She says, in 100 years' time, people will still remember the name J.K. Rowling. And not only for writing one of the most beloved and best-selling fantasy book series of all time, she will be remembered for the role she played in saving civilization from the harms of gender ideology. Rowling is an internationally beloved icon, known for bringing joy to millions through the Harry Potter book series. Harry Potter was, and still is, a cultural behemoth that has been retold through movies and video games and theme parks and is now being turned into an HBO television series. But in 2020, almost overnight, Rowling went from being the queen of popular culture to becoming an internationally hated villain. Her crime? Defending women's rights and publicly acknowledging you can't change your sex. In late 2019, Rowling was already receiving backlash for hinting she disagreed with the transgender agenda in social media posts. However, she fully outed herself as transphobic in June of 2020 by publishing a powerful and highly controversial essay that defended women's rights and biological reality. Rowling explained in the essay how trans activism was treating the rights of women across the globe and expressed concerns over women losing their fertility from medical transitions and the dangers of allowing men into female private spaces. Quote, "It's been clear to me for a while that the new trans activism is having, or is likely to have, if all its demands are met, a significant impact on many of the causes I support, because it's pushing to erode the legal definition of sex and replace it with gender." This is what Rowling wrote. She said, "I do not want to make natal girls and women less safe. When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, and as I've said, gender confirmation certificates may now be granted without any need for surgery or hormones, then you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside. That is the simple truth." Well, it's incredible to read this essay today and see how ahead of the curve Rowling was in understanding the many ways gender ideology harms women and society. As one of the earliest and boldest celebrity figures to speak clearly on these issues, Rowling earned brutal backlash from nearly every corner of the internet, from fans removing their Harry Potter tattoos because they now represented transphobia, to harsh criticism from Daniel Radcliffe, the actor who played Harry Potter in the movies. Rowling has been called derogatory names and had her physical safety threatened thousands of times over her opposition to gender ideology. And almost 6 years after publishing her initial essay, she's still being criticized for supporting biological reality and women's rights. Just last week, Andrew Garfield, a B-list actor best known for being Emma Stone's ex-boyfriend, went viral for taking a dig at Rowling in an interview. Garfield called watching the Harry Potter movies controversial and said, "We shouldn't be, putting money in the pocket of inhumane legislation right now through She Shall Remain Nameless." Well, Rowling has a fund that supports individuals and organizations fighting to retain women's and girls' sex-based rights in all aspects of life. Rowling's financially supported a group that won a UK Supreme Court case in 2025 that clarified the definition of woman and what woman should be based on biological sex in the UK's Equality Act of 2010. In response to that win, it was kind of funny. Rowling tweeted a photo of herself holding a drink and smoking a cigar with the simple caption, "I love it when a plan comes together." Well, of course, Tuesday was Transgender Day of Visibility, of course, a fake holiday created by a man pretending to be a woman. And I think it's a perfect day to celebrate J.K. Rowling. Rowling is a real woman who has held the line on biological reality for us all, and she has given the issue of gender ideology visibility in a way that only a billionaire cultural icon could. She says that she's chosen to make herself visible, putting a target on her back, and has taken many arrows from angry transgender activists who have threatened her safety and tried to destroy her legacy. In spite of all that, she's carried on with a smile and a sharp sense of humor and has helped other women fighting similar battles. One of her first acts of defiance against gender ideology happened in 2019 when Rowling defended Maya Forstater, a British researcher who lost her job for tweeting that a man cannot change his biological sex. She continued to face headwinds for women fighting for biological rights on the ground through the J.K. Rowling Women's Fund. Rowling could have just chosen to stay quiet and enjoy life in her private Scottish castle. Instead, she chose to fight for and support those who don't have the means or the voice to fight alone. Those who give up their own comfort for the betterment of others are the kinds of historical figures that save civilizations. History will remember J.K. Rowling for doing her part. And, of course, let us not forget why Charlie Kirk was shot and killed. He was a white, conservative, male Christian that was just saying things that the LGBTQ P2S+ crowd didn't like. He went out there every day and just said, you know what? Marriage is between a man and a woman. There's only two sexes. There's only male. There's only female. The Bible says this. Here's the scriptures. And what happened? They didn't like that too well. And so that crowd, at least a member of that crowd, shot him to death. And you see, you see why I don't like that liberal talking point of the marginalized. Because you can't tell me that the LGBTQ2S+ crowd or whatever is marginalized. You can't tell me that. Everything that we have during the month of Pride and all the celebrations of Pride and there isn't anything I would love to hear you try to defend what rights, what things, what privileges does a white Christian conservative male have that an LGBTQ2S+ doesn't have? What can a white Christian conservative male do that they can't do? There's nothing. So to say that they're marginalized is just not correct. I would say if you look at the case that just happened with Jaden Ivey, When you look at how J.K. Rowling has been, they've tried to marginalize her, then I think you can make a case that these are the people, the Christians, the conservatives, these are the people that are being marginalized. Yeah. Tell me again, who are the ones being marginalized? I would love to hear that. And you can do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening. This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.